Would like to call to order the February 5th, 2018 work session for the Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners. Welcome, everyone. First item up is approval of the work session agenda, which you all have before you, including the changes to the agenda on page 173. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Just a change in order, real quick. If we can move, I'm looking for the school. Terry, have you got the school agenda item on here?
There's several of them, but it's 4-1.
4-1.
Which one are you talking about? 'Cause there's-
Now, for the unsuitable soils.
Oh, that's,
4.19.
Okay, can we move that to their first item? Is that okay?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to,
Can I break back in? Did you mean like now, like right now?
No, new business.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it should be fine.
yeah, so you got it right.
Yeah, thank
Yeah, so that's moving 4.19 just before 4.20. That kind of makes sense, but that's the first item on the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We are very happy to have with us tonight Paula Yost from the Child Protection and Fatality Team to present her 2017 report. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you. Hello, Commissioners. It's good to see you again this year. So I'm going to start off with the same disclaimers that you guys hear from me every year. The first one is that I'm going to talk about child fatality, which is not something that anyone wants to hear about, but we have to go through this once a year so that you know what the state of things are in Cabarrus County, and it's a statutory requirement. So we will be covering things of a sensitive nature. Also, this report is not solely my opinion. I have presented this report to the Child Protection and Fatality Team. They have edited this. They have asked me all kinds of questions and made comments to it. And several members of the team are also present in the audience as well. So this is a collective, not just my opinion. We review fatalities a year behind, so the numbers that I'm going to be going over with you are actually the 2016 numbers. So first of all, none of you are new to the Commissioners Board. All of you have heard me do this in the past. But Child Protection and Fatality Team is a statutory requirement. Every county in North Carolina has to have a CPFT. Some counties divide them, but in our county it made sense to combine them into one unit because it was all the same participants at each meeting anyway. So what we do is we review any death of a child in the county, and then we look at issues countywide on ways that will better protect children. And again, we are statutorily mandated. So these are our 2016 deaths. We had 22 child fatalities in the county during 2016. They fell into roughly 3 categories. The first category that you see is illness. And the illness category is what we would classify as true acts of God. There is nothing that could have happened that would have prevented these fatalities. These were children who were born sick with either cerebral palsy or who came down with some form of cancer, but there was nothing that could have happened that anyone could have done that would have prevented these children from passing. The second category is prematurity. Our prematurity numbers are actually pretty good for most counties in this area, and our NICU ratings are really good at CHS Northeast. We did work on trying to get a Kindermorn program in the county last year. Kindermorn is a nonprofit organization in Charlotte that focuses on helping parents who have lost children due to miscarriage. We didn't have very many families sign up for Kindermorn when we tried, but the families who did sign up ended up driving to Charlotte to attend the Kindermorn program there. So we do have an open door with Kindermorn, and the hospital, along with various members of the Child Protection Team, do actively refer parents who have lost a child to Kindermorn. I'll also say, too, in that prematurity number, 2 facts about that. I think in that 9, there were 2 sets of twins. Twins are at higher risk of passing away as a result of infant prematurity than single pregnancies. The other thing I'll add is that none of those 9 children died as a result of poor prenatal care. We actually have extremely good prenatal care in Cabarrus County for all women, regardless of what type of insurance you have. Our programs at CHA are pretty solid, as are the programs at the hospital. That's not to say we don't have miscarriages in the county because someone just chooses to not get adequate prenatal care, but we are not having any child fatalities that we're looking at that are as a result of poor prenatal care. The next list is our accidental deaths, and we had 6 of those. If you'll see at the very end, there is a drowning. That drowning is actually currently being prosecuted by the Cabarrus County District Attorney's Office, so I have no facts that I could disclose about that case at this time. The other one was a collision with a train, and this was a child who was walking near the train tracks in Kannapolis. She heard one train but didn't realize there was another train coming in the other direction. So it was a freak accident. Our team discussed this at length. There are signs on all of the train tracks in both Kannapolis and Harrisburg. We really don't think much could have happened that would have prevented it. It was just a horrible freak accident. The county the child was with KCS, and there was a lot of good school response to that fatality as well in aiding the other children who knew that child. I think what we really want to talk to you guys about this year, though, is co-sleeping or unsafe sleep, which if you look under accidental deaths, there are 4 of them that were reviewed as co-sleeping or unsafe sleep. So death by unsafe sleep is something that we have dealt with pretty much since I took over this position 4 years ago. Unsafe sleep is essentially when parents take a child home from the hospital and something happens with that child so that it's not able to breathe adequately. So we see this as a result of children being in cribs that have baby bumpers or stuffed animals all around the crib. Children who are in pack and plays with the same type of thing. There's all sorts of things around the infant's face where the parents think it's cute, they're cuddling with their teddy bear, but the reality is that the child's face gets stuck and they can't breathe. We also see this when parents go to sleep with their children in the bed, and sometimes the child's face just gets stuck somehow in a mattress or on a pillow. There's a long list of various ways that a child can die as a result of unsafe sleep. We actually, as part of DSS reform, the state comes in now and reviews most every fatality that involves a child who's had a DHS history or a parent who's had a DHS history. And so we actually had a review this year that did involve an unsafe sleep case. I know Alan Thompson, who's in the audience, sat on that committee. And some of the things that committee determined is that even though parents of infants receive safe sleep education, including the dangers of unsafe sleep practices from multiple sources, and multiple sources is not an understatement. They're told about this from pediatricians, from the hospital, from all sorts of sources. But we continue to have infant deaths from unsafe sleep. And in Cabarrus County, we have approximately 1 per quarter. And that, again, is not inconsistent with national averages. I mean, it's not like we have a bigger problem than anywhere else, but all of those deaths are preventable, and so that's why it's worth talking about. Local DSS staff distribute brochures on unsafe sleep to families with whom they're involved with if they have an infant in the house. We also have local agencies such as the Cabarrus Partnership for Children who do have funds to provide pack and plays. The only thing is that they have to be referred by a partnering agency with case management. So it's not like you can just walk into the partnership and say, hey, I need a pack and play. You have to get referred by the Health Alliance, the hospital, or DHS. But there are multiple avenues for you to get a safe sleep item. So, there's no excuse of I can't afford a pack and play or I can't afford a crib. Those items are available in the county. You just have to have the right referral to get them. We have also previously examined and updated safe sleep educational materials that we provide to parents within the community. And I think where we are at this point is that we would really like to do a PSA on unsafe sleep. But in order for us to do that, we would certainly need the county to support us in making that. I do not want to be in the PSA on safe sleep. We certainly have several pediatricians who are more than qualified to do that. Several of the CHA pediatricians could do it. we could also work with the hospital on getting them to lend us a pediatrician who could do it. That's really the only thing we could come up with that would help make this problem better at this point. There are a lot of reasons why we feel like parents don't listen. Some of it is old school beliefs of grandparents who say, well, you know, we slept with you and you lived, and that's true, but that's a lot of luck goes into that too. And so just making a good PSA on this would hopefully be helpful. So we would like you to consider offering that to us this year. So these are our child abuse numbers for DHS. That is the number of DHS reports that were received and the number of reports that were accepted. In-home services every month, there are approximately 40 children. And then the average number of children in foster care is 90. And then there were 67 petitions filed for child custody. And then 55 children that were moved to some form of permanence. So what these numbers tell us is that we appreciate you guys funding more social workers, because we've needed more social workers in order to manage this volume of incident reports and to move these children into safe environments. Also this year, the district attorney's office participates heavily on our team, and they're continuing to work with our partners on the Human Trafficking Task Force in order to initiate, educate, and work on eradicating human trafficking in Cabarrus County. I'd like to tell you that human trafficking doesn't happen here. It does. It happens all the time. But we do have a pretty solid task force and a team that's working on that. Also, Chief Assistant District Attorney Ashley Shanley is currently traveling from school to school conducting parent nights to discuss internet safety for children. In fact, she will be at Concord Middle School on Friday night at 6:30 in the gym if anyone wants to go hear her. And the last time I spoke to Ashley about this, she said she would literally go to any school that would have her, because she would rather educate parents on human trafficking than end up having to prosecute someone for human trafficking. That's a better use of your tax dollars. The DA's office is also working with the Domestic Violence Task Force in order to provide essential services for victims. So Cardinal updates. I think last year my entire presentation almost was on issues with Cardinal Innovations. And I think I do have some positive things to report on this year. What I don't think is positive is the numbers of children who we still have reporting to the emergency room. So if you look at that top line, we had 313 children who reported to CMC Northeast, 9 at the Kannapolis emergency room and 7 at the Harrisburg emergency room, who were a danger to themselves and others. So these are either children who were actively engaged, children under 18, who were either actively engaged in suicidal ideation or who had launched what someone believed was a legitimate threat against someone else, be it a parent, a sibling, or a third party. So those numbers are pretty high. One good thing is that Monarch has opened a treatment facility for juveniles, which is just over the county border in the university area. We had Monarch come in and present to the team on the services that they have there. We're very happy that that facility is open and that it's so close, but I'm sure that it opened last month, and I'm sure it's full and probably has a waiting list a mile long to get into it. I also unfortunately got a notification that another treatment facility for juveniles in Charlotte closed down about the same week that Monarch opened. So it's this teeter-totter. We get one place that's doing well, and then we have another place that shuts down. As you guys know, Cardinal Innovations was taken over by North Carolina DHHS, and they have appointed a new board. And so I'm very hopeful that that new board is going to lead to some good some good improvements in the state, not just here. I think it's also important to add, Cardinal does have people who work for them who are solid champions for the mentally ill, and we should not forget that. We have people in Cabarrus County who work for Cardinal who do a great job and who truly care about the mentally ill, and I don't want to forget those people in the news headlines that have been floating around in recent months. I'll also add that our school systems, DHS, and several of our other community partners are still having issues finding appropriate placement for children who are in need of mental health services, but things do appear to improve for the top 1% of children with open criminal and delinquency matters. So for those kids that have always been in DJJ court, what we've talked about is our top 1%, it's approximately 40 kids. Again, that's not a bad number for a county our size. Those children do seem like they're getting faster service and more adequate service, and there's a more streamlined effort for how we're managing those children. So I know we are happy about that. The last time I spoke with Judge Hamby about that, he also felt like that had improved, as had the DA's office and the folks at DJJ. So I do think we made a lot of positive progress there, which is very good. Certainly, we do still have people who are not being served or who are experiencing delays in services, but that's due to limited resources. And that's a statewide problem. That's not a Cabarrus County only problem. And I think probably with the creation of the Mental Health Task Force, our county has probably done more than the average in order to try to combat this problem. So I'm hopeful that things with Cardinal will continue to improve in the next year. So this is my 4-year-old. He was 3 in this picture, and his name is Prattley. And he has what psychologists refer to as an extreme interest in dinosaurs. He's absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs. They're the only thing he really cares about. And so I had driven him all over North, South Carolina, and Virginia to every dinosaur museum I could find, and I ran out of things. So last October, my husband and I flew him to Boston so that he could tour dinosaur museums there while my husband attended a conference. And I rented an Airbnb with the thought that he could have his own room and that would help him stay on his schedule. And I really underestimated what that was going to mean for a 3-year-old. He responded in ways I had not expected. We got to the hotel that night, or we got to the Airbnb, and I showed him his little room, which was a children's room, and said, okay, night-night, Mommy will see you in the morning. And he was like, whoa, where's my room? I was like, buddy, your room is in Concord. We're hanging out in Boston tonight for the next 4 days. I'm not sleeping in that room. That room does not have my books. That room does not have my toys. That room does not have my clothes. And you left my little brother behind. And I'm not sleeping here. And so I tried to, have a rational conversation with my 3-year-old. And he became very upset that this was not his house, and he was not going to sleep somewhere that was not his house. And it wound up being about a 45-minute meltdown that my husband and I had to manage. And when it was all over, I was honestly very shaken at the exchange with him. And I sat on that couch, and I thought, this is what homeless children and their families are experiencing every day in our county, because they're having to be displaced from homes, or their children are entering foster care without a sibling, and this is how they feel. That's the response that you're going to get from a 3 or a 4-year-old. And so Prattley inspired the rest of this presentation, or that incident did. So in Cabarrus County, we have a homelessness task force, and this grid is something that they created. And because I focus my presentation only on children, I'm not going to focus on all of the wheel. I'm just going to focus on the top right-hand corner, where you see the number for Cabarrus County and Kannapolis City Schools. So during the previous school year, we had identified 451 children who were homeless. That was 329 in Cabarrus County schools and 122 in the Cabarrus County half of Kannapolis City Schools. Those numbers don't include any children under the age of 5. So there could very well be children 0 to 5 who are not included in that data. There could also be children who have dropped out of high school who are not included in that data. But 451 homeless kids is what we were looking at for last year.
Paula, before you can continue, would you, for the viewing audience, not only here but on TV, explain the definition of homeless as far as the schools is concerned?
Yes, I can. So the schools identify homelessness as being literally homeless, as in you're sleeping in a car. It can be that you are living in an environment that your family is not funding. So you could be staying at a hotel that the church is paying for. You could be staying at one of CCM's ministries, like My Father's House. one of those programs that exist in the county, the Salvation Army. We're going to talk in more detail about that. It can also be that you're doing what we refer to as doubling up, which basically means that your children and their parents have moved in with another relative. So you have, a 2-bedroom home that's now containing 2 separate families instead of parents and children. So there are various different ways, but essentially it's you're not living in a residence that your parents and your family is able to fund. So every day in Cabarrus County, and I get these calls all the time, school social workers are actively dealing with a homeless child. If it doesn't matter, if you ask John Basleys right now how many of your school social workers are dealing with a homeless child, he'll spit out a number, but at least every day somewhere in the county, one social worker is dealing with a homeless child. Every day somebody at DHS is dealing with a homeless child. Every day Cabarrus Health Alliance is dealing with a homeless child. In fact, I asked one of our team members who works for CHA, and she says she is currently working with 2 pregnant women who are homeless. One is sleeping in her car. The other one has absolutely no idea where she's going to go live once she has her child. We have churches and faith-based organizations, particularly the ones right on Union Street, like St. James, Central United Methodist, First Presbyterian, who are flooded with calls and individuals who appear on their doorstep stating that they are homeless. And the problem with this is that every agency who deals with homelessness in our community is not only inundated with phone calls, but they really don't have a good answer as to how to deal with this. So we as a community have absolutely nowhere to send a child who is homeless tonight. So what I mean by that is that we do have the Salvation Army, which I'm going to talk about in more detail. The Salvation Army is the only place that if you get evicted today, they will take you tonight. But the Salvation Army only has one room that can house families. And that room is full almost 99% of the time. So most of the time, if you get evicted tonight and you call the Salvation Army and say, I'm homeless, can me and my kids come stay there tonight? The answer is most likely no. There are also other problems with the current setup at the Army because the room for women and children is on the female side of the Army. So 16-year-old boys can't stay in that room. They want the 16-year-old boys to stay on the male side. And a lot of parents are unwilling to let their 16-year-old son sleep on the male side for obvious reasons. The resources that we do have for homeless children are also insufficient for the volume of homeless children that we have in the county. I already talked about the Salvation Army. We do have some Band-Aid organizations who will occasionally fund a week in a hotel here or there, but they have issues because they have lack of stable funding, and there's also an unstable environment at our hotels. Like many of our extended stay hotels have drug activity and things of that nature where there's a lot of liability associated with putting a family with homeless children in an extended stay hotel that we would prefer to avoid. So one current potential solution is actually the Salvation Army, and I know they were here at one of your work meetings last month talking about the new facility that they're trying to build. So they are stepping up to the plate to attempt to provide emergency assistance. The facility that they want to build is a $3 million facility, and they did get approved by the Planning and Zoning Committee for the City of Concord on January 16th, but I actually found out last week that has been appealed. And so they now have to appear before the Concord City Council in order to try to go ahead and get their special use permit to continue to go through. I don't have any earthly idea how long that's going to take, but right now, even though it's been approved by Planning and Zoning, we still have to go through the city in order to get final approval for them to begin construction. In speaking with the Army's Board of Directors, they really need that new facility to go where they're asking the City of Concord to put it. Because one, they have the land for it, and that property has already been architecturally designed to go in that particular location. The other thing is that it's near their current support staff. The Army is also a good place, as opposed to extended stay hotels, for us to send homeless families and children. Because the Army is not going to allow anyone in there who is drunk or who they believe is high. If you show up at the Army drunk, they'll kick you out and call DHS. You have to pass a breathalyzer to get into the Army at night. The other thing is that if you get in there and they believe you're on some sort of opioid or drug, the same thing will happen. So that's a good, safe environment where we know the children are not going to be exposed to drug abuse. The other thing is that the Army's new plan, as they showed you, has a basement area where the children are separated from other homeless individuals. So the children and the families are in the basement where they have their own entrance and their own playground. So that's going to be a much safer environment for them. The thing is, though, that's a great start, and we have a desperate need, so that we should definitely let the Army build a facility to house these kids, but it's not going to meet the needs that this community possesses at this time. It's just not. If they opened tonight, they would be full tonight, and we would still have kids needing somewhere to go. And so I'll propose more solutions to that as we go on. I do want to talk a little bit about CCM, and Ed Hosack actually helped me prepare this piece of the presentation. So a common myth about CCM is that it is an emergency shelter. It is not. It was once upon a time, but CCM's board of directors decided that they wanted to be more focused on allowing families who had been homeless to rehabilitate. And so they have several different programs that families can get into. So one is the MAC House. And the MAC House allows single mothers to stay there for up to a year. So that's a solid program. Many of those women get their GEDs. They're able to save money or go to cosmetology school or do something where they can provide themselves and their children with a real life while they're at the MAC House. And that 1 year time period is very helpful for them being able to get on their feet. They also have My Father's House where whole families can stay for up to 6 months. Ed has said that one of the issues with My Father's House is that it's very rare that they're going to be at capacity, because what happens is the rooms are set to sleep 4 per room. So if you have a family with only 3, you're going to have a bed that's open. So you've got a family, but there's a bed that's still open, and they don't put random children in with families that they don't belong to. Same thing if they have a family with 6 people, then they're going to have 4 family members in one room and 2 in the other, which leaves 2 open beds. So even though My Father's House may have a set number of beds, it's important to recognize that all of those beds are not going to be full at any one given time, for obvious reasons. They also have transitional and teaching houses, and these families are given full-time case management for up to 2 years, but this is extremely expensive. Ed has said that transitional housing and teaching housing can cost anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 nonprofit dollars per year in order to get these families rehabilitated where they can really be where they need to be. They also have a stable housing program, which is a below market value housing program where CCM is your landlord. So basically CCM owns the property, but for families who have graduated from one of the other programs successfully, but they're never going to be able to really make enough money to live in what we would consider regular housing, CCM accepts their rent and allows them to live in their facilities. CCM has definitely had some success stories. They did have 2 families who became homeowners, and they have a third in the process. This is largely because they have a good relationship with Habitat for Humanity, and Habitat has been helping some of those families who are, like, quote, CCM graduates find themselves somewhere to go. 71% of CCM's families made progress, and 78% received improved financial stability. The families who wind up living with CCM and are involved in their programs have passed drug tests. They have to pass a drug test in order to enroll, and they have to show a period of drug cleanliness. So if you have a lot of prior drug use, but you can also show that you've been involved in AA or NA for a substantial period of time, and you have a sponsor, and you're clearly trying to be clean, they will work with you. No violent felons or sex offenders are allowed to stay at a CCM facility. It's important to note that because we certainly do have parents who have at some point in the past possibly engaged in a violent felony, not necessarily against their own children, but who may want to go there, and they're not going to be able to stay at a CCM facility. Again, obvious reasons, it's communal living. CCM says that they receive approximately 1 application for housing every day of the year. So when we're trying to think as a community about what do we need, paying attention to critical populations is really important. So of course, we're the child protection team. We view families with children as a critical population. Chronically homeless families, single females, so young mothers who are having children, or young adults who are aging out of foster care. That's a big concern for us as well. And then previously incarcerated individuals. So paying attention specifically to those populations is important. We need more places to receive the homelessness population, period, even beyond the Army. And we need those places to have trained clinical social workers. We really need, when someone's homeless and they come in, they have a story. Everybody has a story. There's a way that they got that way. But we really need to have a clinical social worker who knows what they're doing to have that discussion with them. Frequently what I do see is that this is either driven by substance use, which is a DHS story that we need a social worker to make sure DSS knows that we have that issue happening. We also see it a lot with people who have low IQs. So parents who their IQs are on the low side of normal, and they just have a hard time just functioning, period. Many of those parents are actually eligible for disability, but they have to be able to know that and apply for it and get through the process and be sustained while they're in the very lengthy process of applying for disability benefits. So that's where a clinical social worker is very helpful, because they can point out what we need to help this family get where they need to be. We also need affordable housing. And so affordable housing is kind of a myth for these families. And I don't think anyone wants us to build projects. We don't want to build projects. I know you don't want to build projects. I think one suggestion that we've had is somebody purchasing, preferably a nonprofit, purchasing some of the empty mill houses that we have and capitalizing on our mill heritage, so that we can have families that move into some of those houses, but then have clinical caseworker management to get them kind of through a process, because they do need to go somewhere. Also, I think it's time that we have some difficult conversations with our state legislature about how the DHS rules and policies treat children who are homeless in view of new research on how homelessness impacts brain development related to toxic stress. I didn't put a lot of information about toxic stress in this presentation because I'm not a doctor, but we have a number of pediatricians in the county who could explain toxic stress and its impact on the brain to you better than I can. But basically what we know, which I think has probably always been common sense, but what we now have scientific data to show, is that children need to be able to be in a home that is stable, because otherwise it disrupts their brain's ability to form the connections and the neurons that they need in order to function. So if they're in an environment where they never know if they're going to be in the same house at night, or the water's always getting cut off, or the power's always getting cut off, or they've been living in their car on and off for the better part of a year, you can't expect that their brain is going to develop normally. And then that's going to lead to lifelong problems for them. Many of it is lifelong health problems. Certainly it's lifelong educational problems. And there are these, personally, my personal opinion is that many of these children need to be in foster care. But you can't go into foster care if you're just poor. In order to go into foster care, you have to be able to show that there is a pattern of abuse and neglect. And it's not viewed as abuse or neglect just to be living in poverty or to be homeless. Certainly there are some families who I would not say these children need to be in foster care, but I've certainly seen other children who don't meet the quota who I think absolutely need to be in foster care. Parenting is hard. Parenting is the hardest thing that I do every day. And I don't know how you focus on teaching your children to read or do their homework or potty training or those basic skills that we all have to do as parents if you don't have a home to do it in. I wanted to share this quote with you guys because I thought it was very good. So this is from a student who is now 23 and is about to graduate from UNC Charlotte with a criminal justice degree. And she's actually a graduate of Cabarrus County Foster Care. And what she said to me was that being in foster care is very scary because you're forced to be around people that you don't know and they don't know you. But you learn and you adapt to new people and cultures, and you grow in a way in which is beautiful. You learn structure and discipline, and with that comes love and guidance. Foster care is a blessing in disguise, and if I could do it all over again, I would. And this is a child that I know very well, and she was not happy about being in foster care when she first wound up in it, but she quickly said, you know what? I've had warm water every day for like 6 months, and I've never lived anywhere where I consistently had a hot shower before. And she was 14 when she made that statement. So it takes time to heal from toxic stress. The sooner we get children in a position where they can heal from toxic stress, the better off we are. But we have to do something in order to get that there. I also want to share one more story that is disturbing, but I think it's important to highlight the reality of this. I talked to one mother, and I said, you know, how did you get in this situation? And she said that, quite frankly, her husband got a girlfriend, and her husband stopped paying their bills without telling her. She was a stay-at-home mother with 3 children, and he made all the money and paid all the bills. And unbeknownst to her, he got a girlfriend and started funneling all the money to the girlfriend and her family, neglecting his wife and his own children without letting her know that that was the case. So by the time she realized he had moved out and had begun cohabitating with his girlfriend, everything in her home was being cut off. The power was getting cut off. The water was getting cut off. She was getting eviction notices on the door saying that she had to leave. There wasn't a whole lot of time to do anything with the court system in order to resolve that. And so she had to get herself and her 3 children out. And she said, Paula, the worst thing for that for me was our dog. And I said, well, what happened with the dog? She said, well, our dog was 10, and the dog had been a member of the family since my 12-year-old was 2. And she said, I had no choice but to call the dog catcher because nobody would take my dog. And I had to get out of that house, and nobody was going to take me and 3 kids and the dog. So I called animal control, and when animal control knocked on the door, he asked me, you know what's going to happen with this animal, right? And she said, I do, but can we please not talk about it? And he said, well, your dog is too old to be adopted, ma'am, so you just need to know that your dog is probably going to be euthanized. And she said she looked behind her, and her 6-year-old was standing there. And he said, Mommy, what does that mean? And she said, that was the worst moment of my life. That mother eventually did get herself together. I think the father did pay some child support. I do believe that she and those children are now housed, and that's a fairly old case. That was before this problem is as bad as it is now. So we're at a pretty critical juncture at this point where we need to do something about homelessness. And I don't have all the answers. I certainly don't have all the answers for homeless children. But I think it's important that you know this is where we are. I don't think our problems are any worse than any other community. I certainly think that Rowan County has similar problems, especially worse ones. I think the opioid crisis is going to increase this problem. But I think what's important is that the special thing about our county is that we do something about this. You know, we're not a county who sits around and pretends that we don't have a human trafficking problem or an opioid problem. We do something about it. And so, unfortunately, homelessness is the next thing that we need to do something about. So, if you have any questions, I am ready.
One question on the number of child abuse reports. I noticed there was I think 2,623 reports, and 1,862 of those were accepted.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about the other 761. Were they found to be invalid or frivolous or?
So, Cheryl Harris is in the audience, as is Miss Calhoun, and they would be better suited to answer that question than I am. So I'll invite one of you to answer that question.
Paula, while they're coming up, I
Yes,
had
sir.
a quick question. You separated co-sleeping with unsafe sleeping, but then you sort of described it all as one thing. I just, out of curiosity, why is it separated, or what's really the technical difference?
Yeah, so thank you. That's a good question, and I do that all the time, and that's something I need to fix. The difference in co-sleeping and unsafe sleeping. So co-sleeping is more viewed of when you actually go to bed with your child in the bed with you. Unsafe sleeping, co-sleeping can be considered a form of unsafe sleep, but unsafe sleep can also be just you're putting your child to sleep in a crib with a bunch of stuff in it. So the child isn't co-sleeping because they're not in your bed, but they are in a crib that is unsafe. Does that make sense? Cheryl, sorry.
To answer your question about the differences in those two numbers, the number of reports that we get, we keep a rolling number. So that's the 2,623. When we get those reports, we have to screen them to make sure that the information that's provided in that report actually meets the definition of abuse, neglect, or dependency, which allows us then to respond to the family. So we had over 700 that, when all the information was gathered on the report, did not meet the definition, so we legally cannot respond.
And so do you find that those are genuinely concerned people filing those reports, but there's just not enough?
I think a lot of
So-
times they are genuinely concerned, but I don't believe they have all of the information. It may be second or third hand. One
It
of
may
the
just appear.
or it may just appear without enough facts that allows us to actually go and knock on the door. One of the things we're trying to do to combat that is to do education in the community, and we're always willing and available and hopeful that someone's gonna call us and allow us to come in and do that educational piece, so they know what they need to look for and what questions we are gonna ask. So, we don't want any child to fall through the crack that may actually be at risk, which is why we would rather have more reports than we find that we're able to find our neglected children or abused children. But at least we're out there and we're able to check.
Do you-
So,
Do you
Yes,
have
ma'am.
some kind of system that keeps up with those 700 or 800 that if a call comes in again or from someone else, it identifies that this is a repeat?
our computer system takes care of that for us. So we
So
have a
then you
runner.
go out and look again, and if you go out and look again and you still can't find it, then it's just,
Well, hopefully, if we aren't able to find abuse or neglect when we go out there, if something else occurs, well, hopefully we'll get another call that will allow us another chance to get out there and do that. Quite often, we'll go out and the children will deny. In fact, a very small percentage of the reports that we go out on, do we get full disclosure. So we really depend on the community to give us the information that we need to be able to stay involved with the family and to protect the kids.
So I guess the message to the public is, if you have a concern, you still need to share that concern.
Absolutely.
Do not be deterred, because it may take more than one time.
Yes, sir, and we always encourage us to, anytime we go out to do an educational piece, we encourage them to call us with any concern they may have. Because until we start asking questions, they may know more than what they think they know, or they're not quite sure what it is they need for us to hear,
Right.
for us to be able to accept it and become involved.
Right, great, thank you.
I just have one question. Paula, I was listening to that last case study that you told us about. And the first question that popped into my mind, other than the safety of the children and all of that, and about, in blunt terms, the deadbeat dad, where was the extended family?
I believe that is where mom was going to for a brief period of time. Was she was going to become doubled up with the mom and with the 3 children with extended family. Although what we see is that because people are much more transient now than they used to be, many people's extended family are outside the state, or for whatever reason, they're unwilling to go to extended family. I've worked with people who said, my mom, her husband is a drunk. I'm not bringing my children home to my mom to live in that environment. That's just one bad scenario for another. I see people who don't have extended family. Many of our children who age out of foster care don't have extended family that they could go to. So sometimes it's just not an option, especially if there's been substance abuse as well. Sometimes people have burned their bridges with extended family who won't have them in. So, we see, again, everybody has a story, and everybody's story is a little bit different.
Absolutely, and like we talked a little earlier, as the county grows, the problem grows.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, the resources don't usually grow with it.
Right.
And that's why we're in the situation we
And
are.
we're one of the fastest growing counties around, so.
Other questions for Paula or Cheryl? Well, thank you very much for the work that you and your team are doing. It's certainly, I think, educational for us to understand the facts in these situations, and certainly a lot of folks that watch this on television will have a better understanding as well. You know, the co-sleeping issue, I truly think there are people that don't understand that. So I think it's good for us to have those conversations. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Morris.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, item 3.2, infrastructure and asset management. We're happy to have Kyle Bilfer and Michael Miller to talk with us about the new courthouse architect selection.
Good evening. I want to take this opportunity to discuss with the board the internal selection committee's selection of firm or firms for the courthouse design of the new building and renovation of the current courthouse. The eight-person selection committee reviewed RFQs from 7 different firms or combination of firms and narrowed it down to 4 finalists, which we spent January 5th listening to presentations. Both Commissioner Shu and Commissioner Kiger were involved with that, and we heard from 4 of those finalists, and the committee has spent the last few weeks emailing each other and checking on references, both design and actual construction references, to come up with our internal selection to recommend to the board. So after careful investigation and review, the internal selection committee is suggesting that Silling Architects from West Virginia be chosen as the architect for the new courthouse and the renovation of the current courthouse. Now we'll open it up to any questions. If you want to ask any questions about the process or how we as a group, the selection committee, worked, who was on that selection committee, I'll be glad to answer any of that.
I think it'd be helpful for the
Sure.
audience to just tell all the individuals that had input on, or
Sure.
that were on the committee.
The members of the committee were Captain Nesbitt from the Sheriff's Department, Honorable Judge McGee, a Superior Court Judge, Honorable Judge Hamby, District Court Judge, Michael Miller from Infrastructure and Asset Management, myself, Jonathan Marshall, Deputy County Manager, and Todd Shanley, Deputy ITS Director, and Commissioner Kiger. Commissioner Shu served on the board, not in a voting, but as a overall guidance for the committee.
Who, you said Silling?
Yes,
Spell that,
correct.
please, and who are they?
SILLING Architects out of West Virginia. They've done a significant amount of courthouses throughout West Virginia, Ohio, Virginia.
All up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, none in North Carolina, but we checked their references extensively, and a good portion of their projects fell in the same type of demographic and size of not just county, but buildings that we were looking at building and renovating.
Yeah, that's kind of a key too, that they had some renovation projects as well. In fact, they had a picture that looked just like our courthouse from, somewhere in Ohio out there, maybe
Yes.
Virginia.
West Virginia.
West Virginia, yeah.
So that was a big point of discussion. The other thing to me that was very important was Kyle and Michael were very diligent in calling on-site project superintendents from the general contractor that had worked with the drawings from this firm. And that's something with my background, very important piece of the puzzle, and these guys did a great job following up. And do you want to comment a little bit on what
Sure.
you found
Michael,
with
you
those
can go ahead.
conversations?
Yeah.
Sure. I spoke to probably a dozen references for Silling, and probably the worst comment I heard was drawings were good, but other than that, it was, superior drawings, no change orders, just lists of stuff like that. I actually spoke to one fella from West Virginia. He was a construction estimator, and he had worked on numerous projects with ceiling in the past, and he said that he was so comfortable with ceilings drawings that he marked up his bid 1.5%. Marked down his bid 1.5% just to be competitive in bids because he knew that the drawings were that good. So he was banking on the drawings being right and willing to take less of a commission on his work just because it was that architect. He also said, he made the comment like something along the lines of, if you've got ceiling, you've got the best. They specialize in judicial stuff, so they're accustomed to traveling around. I think they're 4 hours away from us?
Correct.
In Charleston, West Virginia. That's not uncommon for them. All of the references I spoke to said that ceiling was available anytime they were needed. When it came down to punch list, they actually came and stayed overnight as long as it took to do the punch list at the end of the drawings, or the end of construction. So nothing but good reviews.
And in our group, the selection committee did have concerns about their geographic location. To give you an idea, several of the different firms that submitted and had partnered with another firm were firms that were from far away. One of the partnered firms that we looked at was a Charlotte firm who was partnered with a firm out of Denver, Colorado. And they would have handled the courthouse or judicial part of the design, and then the Charlotte firm would kind of handle the construction part of it and be, the boots on the ground. And then another firm that we looked at had partnered with a firm out of Washington, D.C. So that we were dealing with firms or partner firms that were from different locations than just Charlotte or Concord or North Carolina.
I spoke to references from Charlotte to California and everywhere in between, so.
Yeah, we did a significant amount of due diligence on that. Also, a lot of the design references that we spoke to, so folks that dealt with ceiling architects on the design, especially different judges and judicial, were very complimentary of their process of how they go through that and dealing with those, specifically the courtroom layouts and the flow layouts. And that is a big concern in a project like this. This is not just, building a building. A lot of the hard part of this design will be security, the flow of both people who are behind secure doors and in front of secure doors, but also line of sight in those courtrooms and how it plays into both your DAs, your public defenders, your juries, your judges, and everybody in between, including security. And that's a very critical piece of the design.
Okay, other questions? And so is this a decision that will be ultimately approved by this board, or is this for information? Is the committee authorized to make this decision, or how will that work?
The county manager and myself felt it was best to take the committee's decision in front of the board and get your guidance if you see any issues with the decision that our committee came up with. Obviously, the actual contract for design, once we were to get to that point with whoever we would choose, has to come back in front of all of you. This is just letting you know, and if anybody has any issues with our selection, to give us guidance whether we need to go back and meet again as a group or, discuss in a different way or look at a different option.
I, for one, would rely very heavily on not only your recommendation, but also the input from our two commissioners that represented us in that process. So how do you guys feel about it?
Well, as Kyle said earlier, I was only like a liaison from this board to that committee. So I didn't have an active vote, but I was there during all of the meetings. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but when it came down to, we had the 4, and then we narrowed that down to 2. And then when we did the final vote, I feel certain it was unanimous that it was ceiling. I think that
It was not unanimous, but even if we had more than half of the committee change their votes, it would not have won a different way.
But the presentation, though, was very impressive. I felt like this was the company, even though I didn't have a vote. I expressed my opinion, though, and you know how I am on that. And so, but I think the committee made a wise choice, as far as I'm concerned.
They are a very impressive firm. They gave a very impressive presentation. The key was that that's all well and good, but these gentlemen did a nice job in following up on it. And I'm absolutely confident we picked the best firm for our needs. We had 7 good firms, no doubt. I mean, we had good firms that came to do the presentations. For Cabarrus County's needs and where we are and the budget that we're talking about doing, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the best firm for us to use.
Great, that's pretty glowing recommendation. You know, I would say that this is a once-in-a-lifetime project. We need to get it right, but I'm quite sure that those people in the 70s that did that courthouse probably said the same thing. Once in my lifetime, let's put it that way. But yeah, so have we given you the input you desire?
Yes, you have. Thank you, and thank you very much for Commissioner Kiger and Commissioner Shu, sitting through all those meetings with us and reviewing all the documents. And I think we both kind of learned a lot about the project and also how to work with each other. It was very beneficial, I know, for myself and the other staff members that were on that committee.
Okay, well, we'll move to the next item, which is also same players. Proposed Western Senior Center and Library discussion, and Jonathan and Kyle.
I'll go ahead and take lead on that. Thank you. Staff has been discussing a proposed Western Senior Center and Library with a developer. We would like to discuss this proposed facility with the Board of Commissioners and receive input. This is something that's been on the capital plan for a couple of years. That we have talked to both the department heads of the library and the senior center about obviously shared space. There are a lot of different things that they do that would lean itself towards shared space, and as we try to kind of pair together different opportunities in terms of saving and be more efficient in our space usage, we looked at this area. And if you could you scroll down, Terry? This will show the parcel we're looking at. It's the parcel right there in the middle behind those buildings, and that is, if you're familiar, that is Afton Ridge. So that is right off Glen Afton Road. And we have met with a developer who has expressed significant interest in us having a building there and being as an anchor for that parcel. And we kind of wanted to gauge the board in terms of moving forward to discuss with them.
What's a little bit different about this proposal is we would actually be working with this particular developer to build the building, a 35 to 40,000 square foot building, to design it and then have it built, and the county would lease the building with an option to purchase it in the future. So really, we're coming before you in part because, to give you, so you'd be familiar with where we're looking and the concept, but also so we can begin negotiations on the details of that particular contract, and then we would bring that back to you. And it'd really be something to consider as part of your overall budget deliberations. But what we've looked at is this permits us to have a single level building. Although we've looked at 2 and even 3-story options, just to meet our needs, the single level seems to meet them best. Library one side, senior center on the other, but common area in the middle that both can share, both for their individual programs and then shared programs. This site also gives us a little bit of room for some outdoor recreation. There are sidewalks on Glen Afton. There will eventually be a greenway along Cottle Creek near here, so it has additional recreation that will be built over time. But it also has the advantage of being so near quite a bit of retail and other services, so people can combine trips. And for us, in particular, when you're looking at major events like the senior center with some of their dances where they need quite a bit of parking, there's also some shared parking opportunities, other retail they can use. So there really are some advantages to this location. And then finally, when we look at population, this is on, along Kannapolis Parkway, but of course right across the interstate is George Lyles Parkway. The Poplar Tent, Weddington Road corridors, the Kannapolis Parkway corridor. There's connection from Glen Afton over to Poplar Tent again and going out to the western part of the county. So this really is in that area of the county that's growing the most rapidly and where the service demand is, we're seeing.
I tend to like the idea of combining the senior center with the library. Kyle, I think whoever thought that up, that's pretty good. It's about like our fire stations with the EMS. Obviously, when you collaborate like that, you save money, and which is taxpayer money. And I think those two will correlate real good. And the location, as far as I'm concerned, is a good location too, because that's right in the heart of pretty much all that growth out there.
How much of that land, would the building take the whole parcel or just a portion
No,
of the parcel?
just a portion of it. Terry, could you go to the next attachment? I think I might have laid it out a little bit. Yeah, right now, proposed, it would be closest to the Kannapolis Parkway.
Okay.
And kind of, right now, I mean, it's just conceptual, but it's a U-shaped one-story building with kind of a very small green area in between, but that, we're looking and thinking that we might swap that to another side because it takes up too much of the core of the building. So we have some different options.
And the parcel would allow the private developer would retain a portion of this acreage and would be looking at building a couple other retail and service spaces that allow for multiple tenants. And again, a number of those they've discussed with us are things that you see that quite frankly our patrons use. If you go to our Concord Library, you're going to see a lot of folks walking down Union Street to get a cup of coffee and to use the restaurants and other services on Union Street.
Do we have any kind of an estimate, Kyle? I mean, I know we haven't talked about this, but we're talking about leasing this. If the developer develops it, then we're talking about leasing it back 5 years, 10 years with an option to buy it. Seemed to me like, I mean, I don't know, with school construction and the courthouse and the parking deck, with all the things that we're trying to do and maintain the current tax rate. But it still seems to me like, though, that if we could buy that and own it and be paying for it, it would be much better than leasing it. And I know that we hadn't talked about that, but, you know, I just feel like that it would be better if we could just buy it and be paying for it. Because if you lease it, then you're gonna have to release it or move in a few years. And you know the expense associated with that. So that's just something that I'd like for us to sort of all take in consideration when we're talking about what we're gonna do here.
We can continue to talk to the developer about that. Obviously, their preference would be to work with us and build it, and we would have to follow our bidding laws and go through very much similar procedure to a public project. And then, but we had talked to them with the ability to purchase it as soon as 2 years from now, or 2 years from completion. So trying to find that middle ground with them.
We'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful concept. You know, I was involved in a conversation with someone earlier today talking about our libraries, and we're hearing from most of them that their meeting space and programming space is limited, and some of the libraries are having to repeat programs twice because they're exceeding their capacity. So it sounds like maybe that might be remedied here, particularly with that dual use. I have gone out and looked at the site. I think the location is excellent. As mentioned, it's near this heavy growth. It's also located in close enough to take advantage of all the major transportation arteries, but enough off the road to avoid some of the congestion issues. But it's right there, even to residents in Harrisburg, that is now a much more accessible area with George Liles Parkway. And if that road is completed on through to 49, that'll be even better. So it is a great location, I think, and I truly do think people would take advantage of those retail opportunities there. Certainly seniors, our current senior center, which does extremely well, and I'm sure will continue to do so. If you go there, it's a destination. There's nothing else So I think a lot of folks would enjoy that multi-purpose aspect. I had to ask, and I'm still not 100% sure, is this in Concord or is it in Kannapolis?
It is in Kannapolis.
It is in Kannapolis, but just barely. So it's close to the line, so it's easily accessible and usable by both of our two largest municipalities. So, you know, I'm very much in favor of proceeding forward to working out these details. Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we move now to 4 discussion items for action at our February 19th meeting. And we have moved item 4.19 to the beginning. That is Cabarrus County Schools, West Cabarrus High School, unsuitable soils. And we have Tim Louder and Brian Cohn, both from Cabarrus County Schools, along with Susan Farrington from our Finance Department. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you moving us forward in the agenda as we have another meeting that starts at 6 o'clock. So thank you all very much for consideration of that.
Please don't think you need to use all the time till 6 o'clock.
I really don't intend to. Brian Cohn is our construction, he's our director of our architecture and construction, and looking after this project. And we've been on, as we begin the construction on the high school site, obviously, we thought rock might have been our issue, but rock, knock on wood, has not been our issue. Our issue has been poor soil quality. Actually, the compaction of the soil, based on this time of year, we have a high water table, and we're just not getting the compaction we want due to the saturation of the soils and the condition the soils are. So, but fortunately, we have been able to find soil on site that we could mine for this. But the unfortunate part of that is below the finished grade on the back of the site. So therefore, we are mining it and then putting it on our building pads and that sort of thing, and then coming back and having to backfill that. We've been able to do that so far in the volumes that allowed us to go within the contingencies we had built into the project, or the allowances we had within the project. However, that volume is getting to a point where we're going to exceed those allowances, and we will burn all of our allowances at the very beginning of the project, and we feel like that it's best to come back and start looking at some contingency monies so we do not burn all those allowances this early in the project, especially considering some of them are rock and trench rock that we may see once we get into the stadium portion of the project. So we're requesting this time that you release $600,000 of the contingency that has been budgeted for the project to allow us, and I think Susan has actually found it in multiple locations, but I'll let her kind of explain that.
The total project we know is going to need a $1.6 million contingency for this project. So in the beginning, we have funded approximately $400,000 of that contingency. So at this point, I can't turn over $600,000 when I only have $400,000. The remaining $1.2 million is going to be during your FY19 budget request to get that all funded. So in the meantime, I suggested that we take $400,000, odd amount, $414,250 from the West Cabarrus High School contingency funds, and the remaining $185,750 from the Mount Pleasant Middle School contingency funds that are still available that have not been used for that project. Those two amounts together would give you the $600,000 that was needed at this point.
So just, I'm
the-
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that was actually me, but I didn't know I sounded like you. My question was gonna be, so like, what kind of testing for the soil, you know, it's just so depressing when all this comes up, you know, and I'm sure it is for you guys as well, it certainly is for us. How can we be more proactive and not end up here, or is that not a possibility and it just is what it is?
Well, you take into consideration your soil and borings report, and they give you a consistency of the soil. However, once you start disturbing that soil, that's the problem here. The soil in its natural state was not really bad. But once you disturb that soil and it comes in and trying to go back and recompact the soil, that's where we came into an issue. If we had all the time in the world to roll it and dry it out and reuse it, then we probably could use the soil that we have. But we're very fortunate that once we went below a certain grade, we found a very granular material, much like we call training school gravel, and we found lots of it. It's on site. That's good news. So therefore, it saves us quite a bit of money by being able to mine that and use it and compact it in the conditions we have right now. It's probably a blessing in disguise, even though it's expensive right now, that we're doing it in the worst possible moisture conditions, because if we did it all in the dry summer and did it all, and then the moisture level rose in the table, then we may have some failure in the future. And this at least, we're doing it in the worst case scenario, so we don't have to worry about that failure in the future. So, but I don't know, there's not really a true answer. That's why you always have contingencies about earth moving, because that's always the worst thing that you can. You can't see it, you can't dig it up, and you can't go. A site this large, we have a lot of area to cover. And it's amazing how we find great soil in this pocket, and then right beside it for 50, 60, 100 feet, the soil is just absolutely useless. And it's just amazing how you cannot completely, cover where you find the good soil. And fortunately, like I said, we did find some on site, and everybody's worked very, very closely with the geotechnical engineer, trying to utilize that and actually amend the soil that we can to use as much of it without having to mine additional soil. The other option was to bring soil off-site, and that was a very, yeah, and that's our point here too. If we can find it on-site, even though we had to pay extra to have it moved and recompacted, it's much, much cheaper than bringing it from off-site.
And unless something else comes along that you don't know about, such as the unsuitable soils, it's not running the budget for the school up, because it's coming out of contingency, is that right, other than the middle school part?
We had
Yeah.
the money set.
Yeah, there's allowances for this inside the contract. The contingency, the 1.2, 1.4 million that was set up for this project is outside of that budget. So we hold that until there's a need and then they request it, so.
Yes.
That's correct, yes.
We are also working the fact that, this dirt does fall below the existing grading limits, and so that we should get a credit back for the actual dirt that had to be moved within the grading limits, that, they're not gonna be able to use that soil, and as it goes back in to fill the mined area, we should be getting credit back for that. So we haven't finalized that with the contractor yet, so that number hopefully is worst-case scenario, and it should come down. And Ryan will monitor that pretty heavy. Obviously, he already has been monitored pretty heavy, but we will finalize that when we get to the final number and all the pads are complete. The building pad itself is complete. They're laying foundations and moving forward. This is the extra soil we're gonna need from this point forward is for the parking area and the bus parking. And so that soil is, the subsurface is very, very, very wet in that area. We put in additional drainage in there to allow to keep the area dry so it doesn't cause contamination in the future.
You've done your final true-up at Mount Pleasant Middle, so you don't need any of what you're getting ready to give us?
No, we're
'Cause
very happy to
I'm
be able to
telling
turn
you,
that-
don't come back for that. It's yours right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
we're very fortunate that we were able to get that project in and finalize it and turn the money back. And actually, there's some other monies too beyond the contingency. I think it came back as well.
Well, I mean, that's a good use for it, if we,
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's the way to do it. I guess I wanted to make sure I was following the numbers, and Susan explained it very well. So, yeah, as Commissioner Shue said, the overall number didn't change. We just, I guess it's whose hand is holding it. And that, part of that, we have, just to make sure, which I may be a little cumbersome for you guys at times, but I think it's the best way for us to go.
It's in your pocket right now. We kind of need a little bit more than ours.
The remainder of that, wow, this thing is loud. The remainder of that, those funds that are in the Mount Pleasant, there is no, they're finished at Mount Pleasant. So we've got two options. One is, during construction, I think there was some disrepair of the roads at the high school, just from all the traffic there. So we would either look to go ahead and use that money to fix those entry roads. And then whatever's left, we'll pull back out and maybe move it over to there.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was after, making sure all your bills are paid and there's nothing else hanging over your head, now that you're post-construction and occupied, but it sounds like you've got that worked out.
Unfortunately, that project went very, very well with very few or contingencies needed, so therefore we were fortunate to be able to have that money and bring it back.
Just to give you an idea, the contingencies for Mount Pleasant Middle School are about 1.2 million, and we used 71,000 of that money, so it's very little change order cost with that.
That's really good, because see, when they bring up that big number this early in the process,
I know.
it scares me for when
does.
something comes up down the road in the process. But the 71,000 is a really nice number if you can just keep it to that now.
I wish we could.
No pressure.
Who was the architect on the Mount Pleasant Middle?
Morrisburg.
Morrisburg. That's what I thought, I wasn't sure.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Morse, there
Yes.
was a need to move forward, to be able to suspend the rules tonight and vote on this contingency
Okay.
funding.
And is it okay to vote now, or is it okay, do we need to wait on your board to?
Our board has been read in on this, and they're very
So they're
familiar. It's
good.
just a formality of the actual vote, so you should be okay.
Okay, do I hear a motion that we suspend the rules to act on this tonight? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye. All opposed, no. And so do I hear a motion that we approve going forward with the recommended action?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes.
Thank you very much for y'all's
Thank you.
consideration. Thank you.
Okay. All righty, next up, we have item 4.20 from Human Resources, Public Safety Salary Study Results, and we're delighted to have Lundy and Joanna with us.
Actually.
No, that's not Joanna.
Ashley.
Ashley. I should look not
okay, I'll
at the
do the
back of your
introduction.
head.
I'll do the introduction.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Yes, the presentation.
So with us this evening, we have Stephanie Oberg, who joins us from the Employers Association. They partnered with us this year to conduct our salary study for our public safety positions. So she is going to walk us through the methodology, since this is the first time she's reported out in this forum. So a little detail about the process or methodology that she used, as well as the actual recommendation. Ashley Allen is with us as well. Ashley is our team member in Human Resources who has responsibility for compensation, and she was also very involved in the project and is here to answer any questions as needed.
Okay, thank you. You can proceed to the next. Yep, perfect. So just for formality, so again, I'm Stephanie Oberg. I'm with a company called the Employers Association. So we're a local business association settled in the south part of Charlotte. Because we're a business association, our members consist of companies in the greater Charlotte region. Cabarrus County government is a member of our association, and through that membership, they receive a variety of HR services, primarily in the form of HR advice or training and development, benefit administration, different things like that. But we also provide compensation consulting. So that falls into my wheelhouse. To give you a little bit about what my job is I come into organizations and help them market price their jobs, so understanding what the market's paying for their jobs in their organization, but I will also help them either develop a compensation structure or enhance an existing structure. And so for purposes of this project, you all already have a structure in place. So I was really coming in, providing you the external market data, which we'll take a look at and give kind of a summary overview of. And then I also took a look at your internal structure and made some recommendations to job grades and those job alignments. So if we'll go to the next slide. Part of what I'll go over with you tonight, and I'll spend 2 seconds here, we'll look at the methodology. Anytime you go through a market pricing study or a compensation analysis, best practice is to document that information. So that's part of what the methodology is to document that. We'll look at the key findings. We'll talk about some next step recommendations and what that cost looks like. And then we'll also go over a few additional items, the education incentive payout, and the form in which you're doing that. We'll also look at lump sum payments, and then kind of end with the public safety focus groups and how recommendations are to come. So to go over the methodology with you, in total for the public safety group, there were 41 jobs that we surveyed. We were able to provide data for all but 3 of them. So to give you an idea of best practice is that you want to match 50% of your jobs to some form of market data. So we were able to get 93% of your jobs matched in the market. When we're talking about looking at external market data and comparing that data to yourself, we obviously want to look at
an applicable region and industry. And so that's what we did in this case. We used the Greater Charlotte region and your industry code to make sure we were matching the jobs appropriately. Survey sources are what is traditionally used when you're market pricing jobs. So you gather data from other surveys, salary surveys. So there were 3 plus a Cabarrus County survey that we used, so 4 altogether. The 3, what I'll refer to as external surveys, is one of ours. So the Employers Association publishes a survey annually. There's over 400 jobs in that survey, and we were able to provide data for the Greater Charlotte region in most cases. If not the Charlotte region, we scoped out to the North Carolina statewide. ERI is another survey source. It's a national database. It's probably our most robust. It provided us the ability to scope to region and industry simultaneously, and in addition was able to provide some level breakouts. So if there was a junior, senior, master, so on and so forth, level differentiation, and we were able to find that job in there, then we were able to do that. The Nonprofit Times is another national survey source, again, primarily made up of jobs you see traditionally in a nonprofit sector, but we were able, if we found a match, to scope to region. Lastly is the Cabarrus County Salary Study, which you're probably most familiar with. This one we did in conjunction with 20 surrounding counties and cities, and that we collected job data specifically of those counties on about 21 different jobs. So not all of the 41 jobs that we refer to as being surveyed were captured in that salary study, but it's the more predominant ones that you would see across the different counties and cities. So the major key findings here, holistically speaking, is your position in the marketplace. So again, whenever you're talking about where you pay in relation to others, that is your marketplace. If you look specifically at the Cabarrus County Salary Study, you're placed in what we call the 95th percentile. So if you think of the average pay among counties and cities as being a 1 or 100, you all are 95% of that. So from a compensation best practice, you can't, 1 is perfect, so 95 is doing a pretty darn good job. And so we would consider you in market. If you go down to what we refer to as the external market pricing study, that's when we looked at the data across all salary survey sources, the 4 we mentioned previously. And so again, taking that same philosophy, if the market average is a 1 or 100, you're 88% of that market average. So those are the major key findings. Again, validating that you all are paying within a market range. Your market range, you want to be within 80 to 120 of the market, so you are well within that range. There are, however, some recommendations we have from an internal perspective. So when you take the market data, you need to apply that internally. You want your market to coincide with the midpoint of the range. So their recommendations we're bringing forth coincide with your structure, and again, those job grade movements. So best practice is to adjust your structure on an annual basis to keep pace with the market. And so for the coming year, we're recommending a 2% adjustment. There's no additional cost implications to that. You all have already budgeted a 2% COLA adjustment, so the 2% structure adjustment would coincide with the 2% COLA. Additionally, though, there are some jobs that we are recommending to move grades. That's a separate attachment at the end of this presentation. We can look at those in a little bit more detail. Those jobs were recommended to move grades based on the salary study and the market data that we found. Additionally, though, whenever market data provides the ability to move grades, so it's recommended to move grades based on market, we have to take some internal analysis into consideration. So there's other jobs, too, that could move based on that. Overall, however, those grade movements we're recommending for any incumbents in that job that are moving grades to provide a 3.3% increase to those. That is indicative of the base pay adjustment in the North Carolina region. So again, keeping in line with the market or the pace of the market, that 3.3% will keep you there. In total cost, it's roughly $437,000 to make that adjustment. Now, once we have that adjustment, we still need to look at any outliers. So again, best practice is to bring anyone below the range into the range. So we did that, and that's about $18,265 to get anyone that's outside the range up. So from an overall standpoint, your current payroll to then, it would be about a 2.29% increase in your payroll. I'm going to keep going, and then we can look at the job movements. Some of the additional items that came from the study were the education incentive payouts. So it is my recommendation to make that education incentive a % of salary. Currently, current employees, if they receive an education incentive, it's as an addition to their salary, meaning it's a separate pay type, a one-time lump sum payment. So my recommendation would be to add that in to their base pay as a % of their salary. Again, it would be competitive to market and keep pace with the market trends. Additionally, a lump sum payout to employees above the maximum of the range. It's not typical that you have employees fall outside of the range on the maximum. However, best practice is to freeze their salary so that they no longer receive increases in their base pay. However, you would provide them some type of lump sum payment equivalent to whatever increase they would have received through merit. So that's the recommendation here, again, just to keep with best practice and retention. And then lastly, we did some focus groups. So there were several focus groups conducted with the Public Safety Department. And just to give you a heads up, we are summarizing those results right now and finishing gathering the feedback and providing recommendations. So it's likely you'll hear more from me on that. If you go back, I think it was the leading. We can go to the grade changes for a moment before we get to the questions. One more. Yep, perfect. Thank you. So it was mentioned earlier that some of that cost implication you saw was due to recommended grade movements. So again, based on the study, there are several jobs that we're recommending move grades. You'll see them listed by department, and I'll go through them with you. So the Emergency Medical Services Department, for the EMS Assistant Director and EMS Director, it's the recommendation to move each of those jobs up 2 grades, actually. There's also the Master Paramedic. This job is not necessarily changing a grade, but again, coming out of the study, it was indicative that perhaps a community paramedic and master paramedic do need to be differentiated internally. Again, it wouldn't necessarily change the grade. They could be aligned in the same grade, just provide more career development opportunities. You'll see emergency management. There's the emergency management director and fire marshal. Those are also being recommended to move up 2 grades for the emergency management director and the fire marshal up 1 grade. There's several in the sheriff's department that will be moving, or we're recommending to move. The first 3, however, are not necessarily movements as much as they are we're recommending to get rid of them and just consolidate them into 1 job title and 1 pay grade. So for example, the civilian telecommunicator non-certified, historically that pay grade and job was created to provide, again, some career development opportunity, but the market reflects that it's best to just have 1 grade that would be reflective of just a civilian telecommunicator. And then if there are differences in the qualifications, utilizing the range of that grade to differentiate in hiring rates and internal equity. The same would be said for the jail detention officer and deputy sheriff. So again, separate grades due to the non-certification or education requirements. However, those can be consolidated in 1 grade and then utilize the grade range from a hiring perspective and hiring rate. Going forth, the jail detention officer would move up 1 grade, is our recommendation, along with the deputy sheriff, the bailiff, senior deputy sheriff, and I'll just continue to read them, the detective, crime scene officer, sergeant, non-sworn and sworn, digital evidence technician, lieutenant, and you'll also see captain, chief, and sheriff. So again, these recommendations are based on the market movement, and also internal equity and alignment. So again, when you make suggestions on grade changes, those are typically due because the market is suggesting them. So again, you want your market and grade or range spread to align. This attachment here is discussing the totals broken down a little bit more. So we did want to factor in the COLA since we're recommending a 2% structure adjustment. We did want to show you what that would look like from a payroll standpoint if we factored that into the salaries. So that first column where it says current salary with COLA that you see there is your anticipated payroll provided a 2% COLA. The next column or group of columns is the proposed salary or payroll with the 3.3 addition. So again, keep in mind that 3.3% is the base pay adjustment for the North Carolina region. So it's only going to be applicable to those that are moving grades, those jobs that are moving grades, because we want to keep pace with the market. The last set of columns is that 3.3% plus bringing anyone to minimum. So again, best practice is to bring anyone that is not within the grade or the minimum of the range into the range. And so that's what those cost implications would be. And the very last highlighted cell, that 2.29%, is the overall increase from the starting column with the COLA to the ending column with the 3.3 and adjustment to minimum. So it was a lot of information in a very short period of time, but I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to review the attachments. Now you can ask questions, if there are any.
I think just for the purpose of the board, we've had some discussions on this, but just to remind you, many of these positions are the ones that we're having a large difficulty in recruiting, just simply because we were out of the ranges or other jurisdictions in the area and throughout the state are doing similar studies, and they're moving up as well, and we're trying to remain competitive with them. The other thing, I guess, Ms. Soberg, if you could explain the way we looked at 20, how many jurisdictions was it we were comparing to? And what we're proposing to go to is not to go to number one. We're proposing to move up in the range so that we're competitive, but we're not proposing to be the highest paid in the region or in the state. So we are proposing to get up into a competitive rate.
That's correct. So these recommendations would bring you closer in line to the market. And as you could see, there were about 450 jobs positions analyzed in the study. And we're recommending moving a little more than half of that, so about 280. And the fact of the matter is you have made great strides in staying competitive with the market. However, there's a pace of the market that fluctuates for different jobs. And so these recommendations are to help you get to the market for those jobs and keep pace with them as well.
Okay, questions?
Any other questions?
Questions, commissioners? We've talked about this quite a bit.
That's what I was gonna say. Had we not already discussed it, it would have been a little bit Greek, but one of the comments that come out of those discussions was the only bad thing about this is that when we make adjustments to be more competitive, the ones that we're competing against learn about it, and then they do the same thing, which brings us back to where we were. So it's sort of like the cat chasing its tail all the time,
Sure.
trying to keep up.
Yeah. Well, certainly the right thing. I was in another governmental meeting within the last couple of weeks, and someone stood up and very openly stated that they were targeting Cabarrus County law enforcement officers specifically to fill the gaps in their organization in another county, and we've seen that happening. And
In one way, looking at that, Mr. Chairman, it's sort of good, really, because we train them good.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants good people.
we
So
have, we
you
have
to
good
look at it on
people,
the
we just
positive
like to
side.
keep them.
That's right.
Right.
Yes,
Sure.
absolutely. Okay, well, we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on our agenda from Finance, Cabarrus County Schools Collateral Substitution Resolution. And we will welcome Susan back to the microphone.
Introduce Steve Cordell. He's with Nexon Pruitt. He's our bond attorney.
Good afternoon. Good to
He's
be
here-
with you.
He's here to answer some questions that you might have about collateral switching of the properties. But just to get you up to speed, back in 2011, we issued $14.6 million in QSCAB money. And at that time, we had to use, we used the Mount Pleasant Middle School. The old Mount Pleasant Middle School was the collateral. And it's come to now that it's vacant, we can sell it, but we can't sell it without taking care of that collateral. So we went through exhausted our list of trying to find a school that we could use, that we could switch the collateral to, that wasn't already tied up with some other types of debt. And so after all that back and forth, we found Weinkauf Elementary. So that's what we're proposing, to be able to switch the property collateral from Mount Pleasant, the old Mount Pleasant Middle School, to the Weinkauf Elementary. And then that, therefore, it frees up Mount Pleasant Middle School to be able to be sold. Also, within Mount Pleasant Middle School, the old, we have to remove some items that were purchased with QSCAD funding. So some of the switches, some IT type equipment that will need to be moved. And I spoke with the school system, and they have moved out most of that. And one of the stipulations is it has to be used in another school that was financed with QSCAD funds. So they are storing it, and they know they have to use it in one of those other schools. So it gets real tricky with when we're talking about QSCAD funding. So with that, see if Steve can answer any questions, if you have any.
I guess my question would be, how long does that liability last that we're transferring to Weinkauf? When will that be?
The last QSCAB bonds mature in 2026.
2026,
Correct,
April.
yes. So until those bonds are paid off, and these are bonds, just a little bit of background, these were special type of bonds, qualified school construction bonds, that were authorized for a short period of time by the Stimulus Act in 1988. And they're of great value because while they're taxable bonds and bear a slightly higher rate, you get a credit back from the federal government, a subsidy. And the credit to start with is almost, it's approaching 100% of the debt that's paid on the bonds. Now, this money is subject to sequester, so every year you do get hit with a little bit more. But basically on these bonds, the federal government is paying essentially your interest cost, or almost all of your interest cost, even after the sequester. And so it's very important to keep those bonds out and let them remain outstanding. That's one of the reasons why the maturity is out as late as it could go. We frankly run out of schools. As we went through each school, the QSCAB proceeds were spent on a number of different schools in varying amounts. And under the Qualified School Bond Program, that's one of the limitations as to why, if you take something out and not going to use it as a school anymore, you have to move it to something else that was on the list. Because the list was actually approved by the State Board of Education, so it has to be an approved project. The problem we're having with the collateral is the deed of trust. We were able to pledge only the old Mount Pleasant Middle School, but now that it's been, abandoned to be sold, fortunately, there is a process in the deed of trust whereby we can substitute collateral and release Mount Pleasant Middle School and sell it. But the cost of that is that Weinkauf Elementary now has to be pledged. And the school board knows this, and they're fine with it. They have no problem with doing this. And so 2026 is the time period.
Yeah. Okay, other questions, commissioners? Okay, sounds like you've come up with a good plan that works.
Very good.
Thank you.
And actually, the resolution will come before you. You have a draft of it, but it's to be adopted at your February 19th meeting, so no actions required here. So, all right.
You said 1988, but it was 2008?
2008.
2000, yeah.
That's what I,
All right, well, then
Okay.
we will.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to item 4.2, Cabarrus County Schools Agency Agreement, new elementary school.
Okay.
Susan again.
I'm here for a while. So, the agency agreement for our new elementary school, what that's doing is it's giving, it's allowing Cabarrus County Schools to act on our behalf, for the upcoming debt issue. So they can make the decisions, concerning construction and equipping the school, and also allows the, county to seek sales tax reimbursement. So this is a good thing to have in place, and we need it as part of our debt process. So this is for the elementary school, and the debt is going to be issued in May. So we're working our way towards
We
that.
typically do this on every school construction
Every school.
project.
Yes.
Pretty standard procedure. Okay, any questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to item 4.19. That's the one we've already done at the beginning about unsuitable soils, and we go to 4.4.
Let me go back up to 4.3.
4.3, I skipped over that one. Okay.
Okay. This is the reimbursement for expenditures, also for the new elementary school. So, the Cabarrus County will, during our debt process, we will sometimes have to incur expenses before we receive the debt proceeds. So this is a reimbursement resolution in place so that we can go ahead and maybe spend some of the money and then reimburse ourselves once the money is available from the debt proceeds. So we have this as a standard, and it's a resolution that has to be signed in order for us to be able to do that. So there again, we're issuing money in May. Don't anticipate having these expenditures, but we do need to have this in place.
Any questions? Okay, now we'll go to 4.4.
Okay. And this one, Janet Spriggs was supposed to be here today. I emailed her a little earlier, and she thought she was just supposed to be at the February 19th meeting. So I can probably answer some questions if you need to, but it's just the process of them coming before you and asking for you to issue debt for their Advanced Technology Center. It's on our, at all of our estimates and things for the debt proceeds, but just the formal action of them coming and asking you to issue debt for their project.
Okay, questions on that one?
well, I do have a question then.
Mhm.
Since, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to.
Let me try.
Since it's just the preliminary, what's left in the negotiate?
They have not taken, they're taking it, well, they took their board on January 22nd. It's a construction manager at risk type agreement. So as far as next thing they have to do, they have to take it to the state. So they're, it says here, they're sending it to the state construction office for final approval. So we get the approval
Okay.
of us and for their
So-
board, and then it goes to the state
Okay, so the preliminary is not with the contract, it's just with the process?
with the process.
Okay.
Process.
She's so good, she can answer that.
Absolutely. Okay, any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, then we will move to 4.5.
Okay, this one, we need to transfer the title for the advanced technology land so that when we build the property, we will be able to collect the sales tax reimbursements on this property. So this is the title to be a switch from the trustees of the Royal Cabarrus Community College to the Cabarrus County. And so we'll have the title for the property in the county's name, and therefore, like I said, be able to receive the sales tax reimbursements.
Okay, questions on that one?
Just a general question on this, Susan. I probably should already know this, and really I may do, just have forgot about it. But when we do apply for the sales tax after these construction projects, we have a choice, I believe, to use that for debt service. Do we normally use it for debt service, or how do we normally use those sales tax reimbursement funds?
We do. We set them in what's called a sales tax account within the construction, so we can keep up with the amount. And unless there's like cost overruns that they can completely use all their contingency, and we have to go use those sales tax funds. If we do not have to do that, then that money is available to use for debt service. So it does come in quite handy. I did jot down just to give you an idea, for the Mount Pleasant Middle School property, the construction contract was $28.7 million, and of that amount, we had $496,000 in sales tax. And that's sitting there waiting until we can use for our debt service, so, because we have not touched that. Just to give you an idea on a project of that magnitude. So.
Right, and for anyone that may not be aware, that property in reference is on the North Carolina Research Campus, adjacent to the current Rowan Cabarrus Community College facility, and that was donated by Castle and Cook Company for that purpose. Okay, then we move to 4.6.
Okay, this one is very similar to the item we have with our elementary school, where the agency agreement for Rowan Cabarrus Community College for the Advanced Technology Center. Again, this allows the county to appoint the trustees of the Rowan Cabarrus Community College to act as our agent, and they would work with the contractor for the construction and equipping of the building, and therefore also be able to receive the sales tax reimbursements. It's all part of the process. Questions?
Okay, move on to the next one.
Okay, 4.7. This was the reimbursement resolution for Rowan Cabarrus, like I did earlier item for Cabarrus County Schools for their elementary school. This is for the Advanced Technology Center, the reimbursement resolution, so that we can spend money and then reimburse ourselves when the proceeds come in. And also, I wanted to point out too, this also gives us the ability, because you will have a budget amendment and project ordinance attached, it allows us to go ahead and establish the budget, knowing that we're going to get the debt proceeds, and therefore they can pre-audit their contracts. Because if the money's not in place, they cannot pre-audit their contracts. So this is important, this procedure for our debt.
Okay, and this would be the same as the elementary school we just talked about, right?
Yes. So you have 2 agency agreements and 2 reimbursement resolutions.
Just a general comment also, those are good examples as to where that, obviously, these funds have to come out of the general fund. They don't come out of the capital reserve fund, it has to come out of the general fund.
Yes.
But then whenever we get the proceeds from the lobs, then that money will reimburse back to the general fund to make
Goes
things whole.
Right back in, yes.
So that's why you have to, that's where that 15% that we try to maintain comes in handy,
Yes.
especially when you're looking at potentially millions of dollars.
Okay, so then we move on to item 4.8.
Okay. This is the, we come to you annually for our lottery proceeds. It's a process where we have to submit applications to the public, DPI, Department of Public Instruction, for release of our lottery funds so we can be able to make for debt service payments. And like in the past, probably 5, 6, 7 years, we've used our annual collections of around $2 million for our debt service. So at this time, we have an application in your agenda packet for Cabarrus County Schools for $1,754,000 and Kannapolis City Schools for $246,000, and that will give us the $2 million. So the funds will, after the applications are signed by both the school boards and by Cabarrus County Commissioners, then we send that on to the Department of Public Instruction, and they will release the funds into our checking account, they call it, and then we reimburse ourselves for debt service for $2 million. We do budget that revenue coming in each year as part of the general fund budget. So it's just a procedure to get that money reimbursed to us.
And how do you arrive at that figure?
Good question. We have certain, of course, it's based on the population of the schools, ADM. So when the money comes down, we have to keep the Cabarrus County Schools pot of money and the Kannapolis City's pot of money separate. We chose to use the debt service on our COPS 2009 issue, which has both schools districts funding in there. So I take the percentage of that and multiply it by the $2 million, And it sort of works its way out, but I don't want to get my balance down for Kannapolis City Schools or Cabarrus County down to nothing. I don't want to use Cabarrus County money for Kannapolis City Schools debt service. So that seems to work out good in that process. I will, I know a couple years ago, Mr. Shue asked me, he said, do you have any extra money that would pass the debt service money? And we do have a little bit extra money we've accumulated through the past couple of years. So I will bring that to the table during the budget process. Maybe we can use it on some construction projects for that. That's right now, it looks like to me about $500,000 for Cabarrus County Schools and about $50,000 for Kannapolis that we feel comfortable releasing at this
Right.
point.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just wondering, that 2 million, we've been using that as a sort of a rule of thumb for the last number of years. And it's good to know that we've got a little extra laying there, so I guess you wouldn't want to budget 2.5 million, but we possibly could consider raising that for budget purposes to 2 million, 2 million,
maybe.
2.3, something like that, which would reduce the amount of money that we still have left at the North Carolina Lottery.
Correct.
And so, because of the needs primarily,
Yeah, and it fluctuates though, so we're not, we feel comfortable at 2 million. We may not feel comfortable at 2.3 or 2.5 because it's not a given that it's gonna be that exact amount. So we feel, from historical numbers, we feel good at 2 million, but then there is money, potentially some left over. It may vary from year to year, so instead of budgeting it, we feel more comfortable with it being there to use. And you can identify the projects at that time.
Sure, absolutely, and that's a good thing about the growth too, because as we grow, there's more lottery players, and obviously there's more funds coming to Cabarrus County. And that was another reason that I said we might want to consider raising that a little, but if we have access to the other, then there's no need to do that, because he'd be on the conservative side. But if they're gonna hold those funds, knowing that we have the needs, I don't tend to think we should do that, but I'm just one.
It's capped, so,
Yeah.
fortunately. Other questions?
You said, so we're capped at that.
In the budget, the state budget, they have I can't quote the amount, but they have an amount there set aside.
So they pretty much tell
we
us
pretty
what-
much, that's why it's been so consistent around the 2 million for us, but,
Oh, well, see, I didn't know that.
there's a.
So that's why I
certain
asked.
Yeah,
amount.
that
still a
cap
learning
is on the
process.
total
Total.
statewide.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
rest of the lottery money, they spend on other things.
Well, they did raise that, though. The cap was like 100 million, wasn't it? And then they raised it to 200 million?
I'd have to look and
They
see.
didn't raise it that
Yeah,
much.
I
They
don't
raised
I
it-
think they did raise it considerably.
Yeah, well, I think the increase was earmarked for specific parts of the state or or certain school
Okay.
systems or something.
We'll get that answer for you to get
Yes.
the details. I'm not quite sure of all the details, but.
I think at the time, it was determined it didn't get us anymore. Maybe got somebody else some more.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Susan, are you sure you're finished?
Well, my name's not on the next couple items, but I'm gonna sit close because there's some budget-related
Okay.
items.
I was gonna
Okay,
ask her to
next
sit
item.
close for the next item.
4.9, North Carolina Department of Transportation, final bill for Raging Ridge Road Extension. Jonathan?
First of all, you probably thought we had seen the final bill for this. Of course, this is the road that accesses Hickory Ridge Middle School and High School, and we, along with NCDOT, the county had funded the extension of that road and a bridge over Back Creek to connect to Stallings Road, which has been done and operating, and I think people are enjoying, and certainly we needed a second way in and out of both of those schools. There was an extensive punch list that DOT required, and because of the seasons, it took a while to get that done. They also went through some calculations of some monies that the contractor was going to forfeit due to the project not being finished on time. Unfortunately, that did not amount to a great deal. There was $12,000 there. DOT also had to go through their own accounting of the services they provided, and as many of those services that they could provide in project oversight and inspection without cost to us, they did, but there were some that had to be charged by their own regulations. So all that said, Division 10 then calculated what all the total costs were for the project, sent that to Raleigh, and Raleigh has now sent us a bill, which is in keeping with the agreement we had with them. The original funding for this project from the county came from leftover construction funds or unused construction funds for those two schools. Those sat there for a good while. In fact, you made an amendment and added some additional funds from that. But they sat there long enough that Susan needed to transfer those from those projects back into the general fund, I believe.
Well, we needed to close out the funds, so it did end up staying in the same project the whole time. I've got that report too.
So at this point, we have been billed $34,241.96, which is the final bill. And again, by the agreement, we are liable for that. And then I also added some explanation in the agenda item if you wanted more detail and questions from the engineer who oversaw the project to explain all the final calculations of that. But so this is both this is really agreeing to pay that and then the budget amendment necessary for that purpose.
So what was the length of that project from beginning to end?
Wow, so when we actually started discussing the need to connect to Stallings Road when the high school was built, so prior to the middle school even being built. When the middle school was built, that increased the need, and by the time we had done flood studies and everything else, it was well over 5 years.
Yeah,
So I was
knew-
glad to see it done, but it was a long time coming.
Right. Okay, questions for Jonathan?
The money is proposed to come out of the Commissioner's contingency budget, and the budget amendment's attached.
Okay, very good. We'll move to item 4.9. Well, actually, 4.10, purchase of Vietnam Veterans Park property.
The board had agreed to purchase, there's property that we lease from the Church of God Orphanage where Vietnam Veterans Park is constructed. The board had agreed to purchase that property, but we had not brought forth a budget amendment for that purpose for you to consider. So this is the budget amendment for the $375,000 purchase price. Mr. Cook has completed the transfer documents and will be setting up the closing with the Church of God trustees. It's titled different ways, but so this budget amendment is coming before you so that we can move forward with that. And we would ask that you consider suspending your rules of procedure and voting on this tonight so we can get that closing completed.
The funds are coming from the fixed assets, from the sale of the Parks office out on Lake Concord Road, and then the remainder of the funds would come from your contingency, so.
Okay, any questions? Do I hear a motion that we suspend our rules? Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Okay, our rules are suspended, and at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the budget amendment to purchase property from the Church of God Orphanage at Vietnam Veterans Park in the amount of $375,000. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Did we word that adequately, Mr. Attorney? There should be a sentence in there about, and the accompanying budget amendments.
I was actually looking at something else related to that matter when you entertained that motion. But I think at this point, you had already approved purchasing the property. You just need to approve the budget amendment.
That's right.
My question was whether you needed to include the additional costs above just the strict purchase price, because under the contract, the agreement with the Church of God Orphanage was that it would be that the county would pay all the costs of transfer. They're not significant costs of transfer, but that was part of the agreement. That was a discussion Terry and I were having earlier today about that. So if those can be handled elsewhere, that's fine, because they're not significant. But the actual net to the Church of God for this transaction is the $375,000.
So, amend that motion to include purchase of property and associated costs
Is that okay?
and appropriate budget amendments.
Amendment, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, we have a motion.
That's good.
And you agree to that second? Okay.
Depending on the cost, are you okay with me using the commissioner's contingency also?
Yeah, they just voted on it.
Pot of money.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no.
Now they voted.
Now we vote. That motion passes. All right. Okay, now we move to item 4.11, purchase of property for Rowan Cabarrus Community College. Jonathan.
We had been approached by the community college about the need for additional land near their campus in Cabarrus County, and have identified some different parcels in that area along Trinity Church Road. One of those is an 8.87 acre parcel referred to as the Page property. We have negotiated a price with the owner, and he has also agreed to finance that, or has really kind of requested that we finance that, so there'd be an initial payment made this year, but the other payments would be made over a period of 3 years following at a 2% annual interest rate. Mr. Cordell, who was here earlier, has reviewed this to determine, because it is financed, if it need to go to the LGC, which it does not. However, you will need to hold a public hearing to discuss the terms of this arrangement. So this item is before you to set a public hearing, which I believe is the way your agenda is set up, so that at your regular meeting, you'll hold a public hearing to discuss the terms of this finance agreement.
Okay, questions? We have talked a great deal over a number of years about the need for additional property for the South Campus, for the community college. Both I, serving on their board of trustees, as well as Commissioner Honeycutt on their foundation board, have been involved in some of the discussions about this purchase. And as we've discussed many other times, they're not making any new land in Cabarrus County. So this is a good opportunity, I think. So do I hear a motion to approve the contract to purchase? I thought we set, okay, so I thought we did both, set the public hearing, or we do the approval after the public hearing.
That's right.
A motion to set a public hearing regarding the purchase of property for Rowan Cabarrus Community College. Okay, any discussion?
That would be for February 19th.
For February, our regular meeting on February 19th. You accept that amendment to your motion?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes and the public hearing is set. Okay, next item, 4.12 from Emergency Medical Services. And we are happy to have Alan, well, that's not Alan Thompson, Jimmy Litz, to talk about surplus ambulance equipment.
Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. I, along with me, have Captain Jonathan Malden. He will be going over the surplus agreement for the first two items, 412 and 413. And then we'll have Mr. Kyle Billifer joining us for 414. So Captain Malden will take it for a few minutes and then we'll finish up.
Good evening. As you know, annually we evaluate our fleet and go through and see what items are no longer of service to us, and we replace them accordingly. This year we've got 3 units that are up for surplus. I'll go over 2 of them, and then Major Lance will go over the others. Former Unit 942, it's county asset number 8276. Serviced well for a number of years. It currently has 141,869 miles on it, well over the maximum allowable according to our fleet management. We like to keep our assets in some service to us anytime we can, and in this case it would be going to Concord High School, the EMT program. It will give those students an opportunity to learn more about emergency medical services, and hopefully one day pursue that career and be able to give back to us as a county and their citizens as well. So this evening, we're coming to you to discuss the declaration of EMS Asset 8276 as surplus property. Any questions? All right. Can we jump on to the next one, or do we need to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
So we'll jump similarly. EMS ambulance, formerly known as 943, Asset 8277, had 126,940,000 miles on it. This unit would be going to Rowan Cabarrus Community College EMS education program, again, to aid those students in their education. And that program has served us well for many years, bringing us quality paramedics to continue to serve the county.
Questions? Can't think of any better use for either of those units.
Thank you.
All right, the third one we're getting rid of is a little bit different. It's still going to be an asset that will be of great value in the county, but American Transmed, who we all know we have contracted with and franchised with to do our non-emergent and convalescent service in the county, now going on the third year, has approached us with the interest of one of these ambulances as well. Their interest in it is to operate it and equip it to do bariatric transports within our county. With that being said, we are asking to suspend the rules again tonight to open the upset bid process for the next 10 days starting tomorrow, and then be able to finalize this on the regular meeting on the 19th. They have submitted a bid for $6,250 for this unit. Mr. Billiford did some research on the last few vehicles we've surplused over the years to just surplus auction, and the common bid, or the best purchase price we've had for one of those, is $4,100, or in the realm of $4,100. So we feel, after talking with him and talking to some of the dealers we deal with in the ambulance market, that a $6,250 bid is a good bid, and we are going to start this process, and we have done the deposit of the 5% down payment that they provided us, and that's been done through finance. So we are asking you to suspend the rules tonight to vote on this sale, and then we'll finalize it on the 19th if the bid is not upset.
Got one quick question. So is this an ambulance that has already been declared a surplus, or it's at that point and this just happens to be sort of taking place
No,
simultaneously?
it is at that point. It's one of the ones we've replaced. It's got, as Jonathan was reporting on mileage, this particular vehicle is 128,035 miles, and it's out of service now. It's sitting at the county garage down at Fleet Services. We just didn't have a third entity at this point, be it volunteer fire department or whatever. We didn't have anyone else express interest besides the two that Captain Malden described, so we're kind of sitting holding this one, and normally it would just go to surplus auction, but American Transmed heard about it, stepped up and had interest in it, and they kind of researched their options, and Kyle helped us tremendously on that, and then that's why we're here tonight with this upset bid proposal.
So their transports are usually of a non-emergency
They are.
nature.
The only time that would even come in, that they would come into anything, is as a backup to us when all our resources were, or being utilized in a busy time or something like that. They could potentially do some emergent stuff, but it hadn't happened in the 3 years they've been here so far.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And now I would entertain a motion to conditionally approve and initiate the upset bid process in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 160A-266 for the sale of surplus ambulance, and this one doesn't have a number on it.
And that's my fault. I've missed, in doing the other two, missed getting the asset number, but I can get that provided.
The appropriate asset number.
Correct, thank you.
Does that work, Mr. Attorney?
I think it's in the
and it may be in the letter. Yes, you're correct, thank you. It's asset 8275. It's a 2012 Chevrolet G4500 ambulance. I'm sorry, 8278. The numbers are running together. Asset 8278.
Okay, to be included in the wording of the proposed motion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes. Okay, and we move to item 4.15.
Thank you.
Good evening. We come before you this evening with request for approval for two contracts, one between CHS and Cabarrus County EMS and the other between Cabarrus County EMS and Justin Brines, Specialty Services Supervisor. Took for granted everybody knew me. So this is a request for contract approval for this telestroke project, which essentially is pass-through funding. Funding provided by Northeast Foundation to us to provide funding to Medris to essentially bring a neurologist in the back of the ambulance. It allows for the neurologist, with our help, to conduct an assessment of a stroke patient while we're transporting them to the hospital, which will ultimately allow us to shorten the door-to-needle time, which essentially, when a patient arrives at the hospital having a stroke, they need to go have a CT scan. That takes some time to get into the ER to get checked in, the neurologist to do their assessment. We're wanting to hopefully take that whole step out, take them straight to CT so that treatment can begin much faster for these patients who are experiencing stroke symptoms and ultimately diagnosed with having a stroke. The reason we're very excited about this is, to our knowledge, nobody else is doing this. So once again, this puts Cabarrus County EMS and Cabarrus County on the map as a trendsetter for providing excellent patient care. So the request is for contract approval for the funding, and Alan's going to talk just a little bit about the amount, I think.
The period is a 2-year period. It's $120,000 total amount. That's addressed by the budget amendment that is in your packet. It'll be $60,000 the first year, $60,000 the second year. And as Captain Brines mentioned, it is the first of its kind project that shows the progressive nature of what's happening here in Cabarrus County. And our hope is to expand this into other service areas that we work with through Carolina's healthcare system Northeast. Again, an excellent project we've been working on now for about a year to bring this together. The demos that we've done with it is going to make a tremendous impact for our patients. And essentially, it's a pass-through type grant. I mean, it's the funding's coming through the foundation at the request of the hospital to us. Items are being placed in our ambulances, and then they'll be responsible with us for the maintenance of the software and the hardware associated with the project.
Okay, questions?
Will this be on one vehicle, two vehicles, all vehicles?
It will eventually be on all vehicles. The first phase is to pilot about half of our vehicles. We're going to pick the ones who have the longest transport times. We feel like we can have the biggest impact with those vehicles initially, and then very shortly thereafter it would be added to all of our transport units. Easiest way to describe it would be sort of like FaceTime, but it's for healthcare setting with HIPAA compliance, so that the doctor can actually have video and voice assessment of the patient. This provides the hardware, as Alan mentioned, much like an iPad, as well as the software and all support associated with that. So,
one of the things that's already happening with a project of this type with some of the hospital systems is a concept called telestroke, to where they're speaking with patients at outlying emergency departments to make a decision on care being rendered and transport destinations. This essentially does the same thing. It turns the back of our ambulance into an emergency department with that same type of evaluation, a transport decision, in a direction on care.
I mean, that's an easy call. I mean, the time is everything, you know, in these situations. So if you're helping with that, and I think you nailed it, Justin, with the when you said best possible patient care. I mean, if that's the goal and that's what we're doing, then we're doing the right thing.
So on the timeline, it would start when?
So we have a meeting tomorrow with Medris. Much of this has been pending, contract approval. We have a meeting tomorrow. They essentially have designed the hardware for our unit. So this is something that took some time for them to figure out exactly how it's going to be mounted. We have a meeting tomorrow to finalize. They have their concept and to finalize moving forward. So to my knowledge, would be, move very quickly once contract, is approved, with placing the hardware, and moving forward. So I would foresee it being less than a month, to have several of our units up to speed, so.
And that would be the projection, within 30 days of contract approval, to have some of these units on the road providing this service.
Yeah, I just have to say how fortunate we are to have you guys and to have an institution like CMH Northeast involved in this. I have toured that telemed facility there at the hospital, and my thoughts when looking at that were, wow, these people all over the region are looking to Cabarrus County institution for guidance for handling these situations, and we have it right here. I also had participated with a family member in one of those 2 a.m. transports with our EMS folks with a stroke issue. And so, I just think we are extremely blessed to have the resources here in Cabarrus County that we do through you guys and through our hospital. And I think most people in our community don't really understand how fortunate we are. But thank you. And, I think as Commissioner Kiger said, that's kind of a no-brainer. In addition, I might add the Northeast Foundation providing the funding for this. So it's just a win-win all the way around.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to us. Okay, up next is item 4.16, offer for purchase of tax foreclosure property, Kyle Bilfer and Michael Miller.
Good evening again. Tax foreclosure parcels that are not purchased on the courthouse auction have been sold using an online surplus property web service. One particular parcel located at 337 Broad Drive Southwest in Concord has recently been received and from our actual tax department, and we've also received an offer for upset bid on that even before we've advertised it. We have brought 5 to 6 properties to the board over the past 2 to 3 years for upset bid sale like this when they don't sell on GovDeals or before we actually get them to GovDeals, which is the online surplus property service that we use. The offer that we received is from a gentleman that has purchased 2 of our properties in the past via upset bid, and the offer was for $500, and that was from Donald Watson. And to give you an idea, the amount of taxes and all the fees, we paid legal fees when we had that and had to advertise it, we owe $6,300.81. That number up there was amended by our finance department and tax department late on Friday evening. So we're being offered an upset bid, an amount of $500. We've received the deposit and deposited, and we owe $6,300 on it. So there will be a loss. And I went through and researched the last 6 properties that we did by upset bid, and in some cases, we did incur a loss. And some of the questions that previous board members have asked me is, how do we gauge, how much of a loss is too much? And there is no calculation or formula that we use in any way. A lot of the properties we have sold by upset bid in the process have been on the market or been marketed for a long time with no potential buyers. It just so happens this one has not even been marketed yet.
Although we will take a loss, it gets the property back on the tax rolls so that it is taxable at the time by the new person. And then some of those fees are abatement fees and stuff through the city of Concord, whether they clean their lots or if there's a demo project on there, there's some fees attached to that. So we have to pay those to clear the deed. So we're gonna be having some conversations with them about some of the, sharing that cost and sharing some of that loss, but that's where we are. But the biggest thing is, whatever that number ends up being, it gets this piece of property back on the tax rolls and it's taxable one more time.
Yes, and the county does have to pay for maintenance on that lot currently. There's no building on it. It's an empty lot. We did get another property that does have a building on it, though.
So as long as we keep it, that number, that loss gets bigger.
Yes, that
We,
would be correct until we would sell it on gov deals. But the way that our ordinance reads is that after 6 months, we drop the asking price 25%, and then after 12 months, we drop it 50% of the original cost. So as it keeps going, we're dropping the cost and then realizing that loss again.
right. And so we have the flexibility to do it this way.
Yes, you do. You can tell me no, or you can tell me to advertise it tomorrow, and that's what I will do, and we will go through the upset bid process, and I will be up in front of you with Mr. Lentz at the regular meeting.
And then we'll have somebody in Wisconsin that buys it and then comes back and says it's not what they thought it was, and we'll spend another 12 months talking about that, right?
Yes, sir. I feel that
happen.
it can happen. I feel that legally we have done very well with ourselves with that online service that
Right.
we advertise very clearly.
I think the guy you're thinking about was from the state of Washington.
It was Washington.
Well, Doug,
And
I got part of it right.
we dealt with that
Okay.
at no additional cost to the county.
Good, good, good. Okay, questions, commissioners?
But I think to do this the way Kyle's talking about
Need
it
to
today, you
suspend.
need to suspend the rules.
Yes.
And treat this one just like that ambulance to transmit.
Right. Okay, what's your pleasure, commissioners? The request is to, if you would like to proceed forward, a motion to suspend the rules and accept this proposal tonight.
In lieu of county manager's comments, that the best thing to do is get it back on the, out of our hands and on the other side of the table. I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And so would we have a motion to conditionally accept the initial bid from Donald Watson and commence the upset bid process? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, we move now to item 4.17 from Planning and Development, Community Development Grant Request. We're happy to have Kelly Sifford.
Thank you. It's that time of year again. I visit you annually to discuss the grants. I am requesting that we get permission to apply for weatherization, heating and air, repair and replacement, HHI, and any Duke opportunities that become available. I am suggesting that we do not pursue home funds this year. We are still trying to get Prosperity Ridge off the ground. There have been some bidding issues there. They are having trouble getting competitive bids. And we've got 2 years' worth of funding tied up in that if for some reason that did not go forward, we would have to expend that money pretty quickly. So I would prefer not to stack any more money on that until we can clear this. I would like to report to you that the Duke funding, they've given us 2 different options on in this year. What we've done, they have a rebate program, which they are rebating things that we've got paid for out of the grant, and we are required to put that back into the program and expand the program. And so we've been able to do a lot of heating and air units with that for people who otherwise would not have been able to get their heating and air done. So we're very excited about that. It's been a great, great program. And they have the Helping Homes Fund, which I
I just had a really great experience just this past week where we went to a home. A family member was caring for a cousin who was paralyzed. I walked in and the oven was being held closed with a bungee cord. And so we started checking, and we were able to get all new appliances for this family. So it was a very exciting event for us. We were really happy about that, and Duke covered the bill. So we're really excited about what they're doing, so we certainly want that opportunity to proceed that way.
Okay.
You have any questions for me?
So when, when will, is there a timeline on the Prosperity Ridge process? I know, as you said, it's been going on for quite a while.
We are moving as quickly as we can. They had someone who had kind of negotiated a process, but they are required to bid that with all of the usual Section 3, Section 8, Section this, that, and the other. And so we needed to go back and do that. And HUD obviously wants more than one bid, and everybody is so busy, nobody wants to put in a bid on it outside of the original agency. I believe it's been bid 4 times now. I'm hoping that we can get some resolution with HUD very shortly on this, since we cannot get any other interest and move forward with it, because as you all know, construction prices are just going up, they're not going down.
Right.
So we continue to work on that and have been aggressively pursuing it. And so I'm hoping that we can move that forward very quickly.
So I guess this would be one of the curses of a better economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Kelly? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to item 4.18, advertisement of delinquent taxes, and we're happy to have David Thrift with us.
Good evening. So General Statute 105-369 requires a report on the amount of unpaid property taxes for the current year that are to be liens on real property. We also need to have the commissioners set the advertisement date to advertise those delinquent taxes. So our calculation for the 2017 real estate delinquent taxes as of this morning is $8,050,692.62. We subtract out amounts that are currently under bankruptcy, which is $45,017.17. We also subtract out amounts that are involved in property tax commission appeals, which is $1,332.81. So the total as of this morning's real estate delinquent taxes is $8,004,342.64. I would request that the set the advertising date for March 25th, 2018. The March date for advertising will allow us an opportunity to provide these taxpayers with the 30-day notice that the advertising will take place, so we can try to collect those delinquent taxes.
So hopefully that amount would go down prior to that.
Certainly. I think you noticed in the original information you had from a couple weeks ago, we were at 10 million. So that's a constantly changing number, with hopefully more so. And once the advertising notice can be sent out, that certainly gets a lot of attention. People want to avoid having their names in the papers.
David, is that number there, is that pretty much historical for this time of the year, pre-advertisement?
Right, so looking back, we seem to be right in line with where we're typically at on the collections. Our collections over time have gradually increased, but we're in line to continue to do that. So.
Just curious, what kind of expense do we incur to advertise those pages and pages of names?
So the expense that we incur is actually an amount that is applied back to these accounts. So there is an advertising fee that's placed on these accounts to cover that advertising. So as we collect those delinquent funds, we recoup those costs. Or attempt to recoup those costs.
Okay, other questions for Mr. Thrift? Thank you. Okay, and we now move, let's see, have we covered all of our add-ons? I believe we have, yes. So we now move to approval of the regular meeting agenda, which you all have a copy in front of you.
I believe you need to add to your new business the EMS, that's sale of the surplus ambulance to American Transmed. Sorry, Terry.
On our regular agenda.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. G3. Okay, does anyone see any other adjustments that need to be made? Okay, then I would entertain a motion that we approve the proposed agenda with the addition of item G3, sale of surplus ambulance to Transmed. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. We do have need of a closed session tonight. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session per North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11 A3, 4, 5, and 6 to discuss pending litigation, economic development, acquisition of real property, and personnel matters. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes, and we are now in closed session. Thank you.